what is it that we are essentially? What is it that we are on a absolute level, right? If a fence, we were to break that down on an absolute level, okay, we'd say atoms and particles, but it would be wood, right? Or if we were to break wood down, it would be tree. But as you probably understand what I mean, like if we were to break down bread, we get it from wheat. So if we were to break down you, right, the one who is hearing these words, what would we get? There's obviously something there, and it has to be alive, right? It can't be not. If it wasn't alive, it wouldn't be existent. You wouldn't be hearing my words. So whatever it is conscious, and therefore it has to be something. It has to exist. And obviously through science alone, we've already discovered that when we actually look at the stuff we're made of, it disappears. Quite literally. It is quite literally, as ridiculous as that sounds. If we were to get a microscope and zoom in all the way onto an object, the stuff the object is made of disappears. In other words, there's nothing there when we look close enough. So with that being said, what we tend to believe is that we are born and we develop a consciousness, and consciousness turns on like a light switch into a human brain. Now, the real question for you and for everybody else is that really true? Is that true? In your experience right now, you'd be able to know for a fact that you are aware and that you are conscious. The question then is that consciousness limited? And is that consciousness what you are? In the spiritual traditions, this is really the first big fundamental question, which people don't realize they're looking for. When we look for what we are, when we're looking for who we are, we usually look for it on a very superficial level. Who am I really? Am I confident? Am I outgoing? Am I really this shy? Am I really this, do I really lack this amount of confidence? Am I really a painter? Am I really an artist? Am I really a whatever it is? Is this what I'm meant to be here for? Is this who I am? That's not really what we're looking for. What we're really looking for is what we actually are on a scientific level, like the actual thing that we are, right? And that would be consciousness. If you were to look in your experience, the only thing that you can tell that you are is consciousness itself, because it's the only thing that knows or can render the fact that you exist. So we have to go by the facts of our experience. Are you able to clarify whether you exist? If you are, then the next question would be, is this existence what I am? Obviously, you would say yes, because you are the one that is alive, able to render the question. So then, what is the qualities of the one that is rendering whether you're alive or not? It isn't your eyeballs. It isn't your mind, because your mind is simply a collection of thoughts, perceptions, and complex thoughts and perceptions like concepts and beliefs, and maybe some images. But none of them, all of those are observed. Right? If all of those are observed, then you're obviously not what they are. So what is observing the mind? It's you, obviously. And then what is the qualities of that you? The qualities of that you is, if you were to describe it, there are no qualities other than the fact that it's aware, that you are aware. And if we keep coming back to that, over time we realize I am essentially awareness. Like there's nothing else to it than that. I am awareness. It's the furthest thing back. It's the furthest back I can go. And it's the only knowledge I can know that doesn't require the mind. Think about that for a second. This knowledge of knowing who I am as awareness is the only knowledge that doesn't require the mind. Every other thing requires the mind. Even the to think is the mind, requires the mind, obviously. To imagine requires the mind. To know this mouse requires the mind. To know any object in experience requires the mind. And that's all there is to experience. Objects and thoughts and images. Everything in experience requires the mind. But knowing that you exist doesn't require the mind. Because it's a knowledge that is empty of the mind. The minute that you know you exist, the minute that you know that you're aware, there's no mind involved. So this is why they call it this sacred knowledge in the Indian traditions, because it is a very sacred knowledge. It's the one thing that we can know in the entirety of existence, whereby we don't use the mind. So this is why this is such an important question. So back to the real answer here, or the real statement. This awareness can't be born. It can't just appear, right? It can't just appear. Consciousness can't appear out of nowhere. If consciousness could appear out of nowhere, who would be there to render it coming into existence? There must be, because there would have to be something prior to it to clarify or to confirm that it came into existence, and that thing would have to be aware. Like, think about it. You'd have to have awareness. If awareness really was born, like there was a time that it was born, like when you were in the fetus, when you were a fetus in the womb, and it just boop, turned on, it would have to come from somewhere. Where could it have come from? Right? Think about it. Consciousness, zero-dimensional, lack of objective quality, doesn't exist in time or space, which is where the mind exists, right? So it's not an object. Somehow is created by an object? Obviously not. So therefore, we can't claim that consciousness ever came into existence, right? If by existence we mean the relative world. So ultimately, there's really nothing going on. There's just consciousness. And then consciousness is experiencing a localization of itself that we call the mind. And in that process, separates itself in apparent from apparent existence, creates an individuality, and then all of a sudden we're experiencing a world of 10,000 things. And then all of a sudden I'm a human being, and then all of a sudden I have a relationship, and all of a sudden I'm eating food, and all of a sudden I'm drinking water, and all of a sudden I'm having a conversation, and all of a sudden I'm talking about consciousness. This is a natural process consciousness goes through to come back to realizing it is actually one with everything. So, for example, consciousness being the only thing that has ever existed cannot be anything other than everything. So that means that it is in complete harmony with everything. So in order to experience that harmony, in order to experience what it's like to have that, there has to be a process where everything is created. And in that process where everything is created, we call it life. And there's the appearance of a linear structure to that. And there's appearance of things happening over a succession of time. When really what that is we're experiencing what it's like to separate from the whole in order to come back to the whole, to go, holy shit, this is how much freedom I have. I have so much freedom that I can set the parameters of my own limitation. And then we get to experience coming back to that fullness, which is the one thing that everything can't experience if it is already everything. So it experiences the point of view of everything in order to recognize and realize that it is everything from the point of view of one thing, witnessing it all. So therefore, we cannot die. What we experience as death of another person is simply it's simply the awareness or the focal point or the mind has transitioned to another place completely, like has left the body. And from our experience, death is never experienced. We can't experience death. If by death we mean turning off completely. We will, however, experience a transition, but is that really death? If that's the case, then every time we walk through a doorway, we're dying. If that's the case, every time that we enter a new country, we're dying. If that's the case, every time we go to sleep, we're dying. It's not death, right? We can't call it that. Otherwise, we've got to stop calling death everything every time we move into a new place. I just moved house, right? We don't die when we move house, right? We shift and the experience shifts. Now, usually what we find as ego death is the death of the identity. That is terrifying. If you hold on to your identity, you will suffer. You will suffer because you're holding on to something that doesn't actually exist. And that is what creates the biggest most terrifying experience of all, which is the closest thing that we can actually experience as death, which is something that is infinitely alive and exists, attaching its identity to something that doesn't exist, like a temporary, limited, finite mind, which is made of temporary, limited thoughts and ideas. And these temporary, limited thoughts and ideas will die. They die every moment. We just don't notice it. So if we believe that we are these collection of things, then we impose this infinite life onto it, which is the source of life, which is what we are, consciousness itself, and believe that we are that. And then when that disappears, I mean, you're going to feel like you're dying. I've had the experience before. It is probably the most traumatic experience I've ever had, at least one of them, because I couldn't let go. I couldn't let go of the identity. I was still alive the whole way through it. I wasn't really dying, but I was experiencing it as if I was dying. So this is why it's important to let go, because if we don't learn this and we die, literally, and we finish this lifetime holding on to that identity, it's not a good experience. I'm not saying this to scare you. It's a fact. I've experienced it. I've experienced every single form of my lifetime that I could have ever possibly existed from this incarnation. I know what it's like to hold on to an identity when we're supposed to have let go. It's terrifying. This is why that I want to be able to share this type of stuff, so that people don't hold on to their identity, so they can recognize their true identity, so that when we go through these inevitable changes, which we will, we learn how to let go. And we can learn how to seamlessly transition through every change that life brings us, even if it's transitioning from life itself. So, if you enjoy this content, be sure to leave a like if you've watched one or two of them. And see you in the next one. Take care.